Już ustawił transmisję?
Tak.
Już wiesz, jak wszystko
już jest.
zrobić.
Tak, tak.
Dobra, super.
Wszystko jest. Okay, I think that we can start. My name is Michaël Green, and the lecture will be in English for the sake of international community who may be watching us live or maybe watching us at a later stage. So first of all, welcome. It will be a rather short lecture which aims at presenting the center and the core ideas behind it. And I'm very glad that you came, so thank you. So first of all, I will start with a very long word of thanks, but I think that the most important that we should thank people who contributed to the establishment of the center at the very core. It's Professor Łukasz Korporowicz, who is here with us from the Faculty of Law, and Professor Marzena Woźniak-Łabieniec, who is from the Faculty of Philology, but at the moment she is not yet here. And of course, thanks to the rector, the vice rectors, the deans of the respectful faculties, so Faculty of Philology and History, Faculty of Law, and Faculty of Philology, and to Adam Sitarek, who is director of the Center for Jewish Studies where I work, and Dr. Anna Brzezinska, who is also at my faculty and who consulted me a lot on the matter of the center. So the center officially was created at the end of the year, officially 1st of December, but in practice somewhere mid-December. So practically it's 3 months since it has officially started. But before I speak about the center, I would like to talk to you about the topic, about Egodocuments. So I will start with a brief example, and we will be discussing Egodocuments, self-narratives, and everything that is in between them. I will present the center, and if you have any questions, then I will be happy to answer. So let us begin with a voice from the past, what I would call an authentic voice. And it's a quote from a diary, well, from a memoir that was written around 1710, 1711 by a French Huguenot, so French Calvinist, who found his way all the way to the Netherlands to hide from persecution, which he suffered in his native France. And in the text which was dedicated to his children, he recounted back his entire life, starting with his childhood, the murder of his father, his education, first literary works, and then his flight first to England, and then after a short return to France, to the Netherlands. And at some point in those memoirs, he writes the following passage, and I would like to read it out because I think it summarizes the essence of the importance of such sources for historical discipline. So, I came here to the Dutch Republic 30 years ago with scarcely a softer pillow than the stone upon which Jacob fell asleep. I was like Moses tormented in a seductive Egypt, his native France. God drove me out, as he did with the Israelites, in order to lead me to a true haven of salvation, that is, into a land flowing with milk and honey. So what we see here is a quote which is full of biblical references to the Old Testament. And if we think about it for a moment, we can find several layers of information. First of all, we see persecution. He's fleeing from his native France into the promised land. He describes his personal feelings, how he was suffering back in France, so tormented like Moses. And then his Protestant view speaks about God taking him out of France and delivering him into the promised land. But the promised land, of course, is the Netherlands, and then one would ask himself or herself, why This is the promised land. Why did he feel safe there? And then we come into the domain of legal history. What allowed him be to feel safe in the Netherlands? And then we can discuss the Dutch toleration, the conditions, legal aspects. We can also discuss art aspects of being a Huguenot and architectural aspects of Huguenot temples, etc. So this is just a glimpse. So all of us know what we are actually talking about. When we speak about Egodocuments, we should remember that the word itself is not just a random name. It's a term which was explicitly coined by Jacob Prester, who was a Dutch Jewish scholar, and he invented this name because he was trying to find out an appropriate way to describe sources that he was working with in relation to the Holocaust, so personal memories from the Holocaust, from the survivors and also from those who perished. And this neologism was quite forgotten for some time and revived in the 1980s. I will get there in a moment, but importantly, this ego, the I, is the most important thing. So the document should contain the particle I and also should speak about the person. So it's not enough that I write I, Michaël Green, and then talk about the politics and the weather. Ideally, there also should be some element of self reflection, or at least something that has to do with me personally. The methodology was developed by Rudolf Dekker and Ariane Bacherman from the Netherlands. They were actually the pioneers of promoting this notion in the Netherlands first and then also globally. When we speak about the very classical types of the source, and I just want to give you an introduction so you know what the center is about. Letters, diaries, journals, memoirs, autobiographical notes, those are the classic texts that could be considered as Egodocuments if there is this element of the I. And importantly, Egodocuments, well, as I phrase it, allow us to gain access into how people thought and how they understood their own lives. So, element of self-reflection. The Dutch tradition of studying Egodocuments, as I mentioned, started in the 50s, but gained momentum in the 1980s, and they have been extremely active all the way into the 2010s. Nowadays, the work is taken over by the next generation of scholars, but it is important to mention that the Dutch tradition is the one that actually defined how Egodocuments are worked with. Rudolf Dekker gained a large grant that allowed him to inventarize, and his team, all of the Egodocuments in the Netherlands. It was quite a big project. They went from library to library and listed everything that they found. It was later published as a catalog. Here is the newest edition. It listed back then about 700 sources. Nowadays there are about 1,000, and there are other databases that have other sources which they could not find back in the day, because of course nowadays we have better inventories than in the past. So the important thing about this Dutch tradition is that it is what we would call puristic. So it is a document, a written source that speaks about oneself, and the methodology is rather simple. Whom is it written for? You need to cross-reference facts in order to find out if it's reliable or not. Contextualization, as in the critical historical method, historical, religious, cultural contextualization, and one can apply micro-historical approach if it's necessary for the study of the particular topic. Importantly, they did not only engage in inventarization or case studies, they also established in the Netherlands series that was published in those Egodocuments in Dutch, but properly investigated and assessed. So here we have some examples, and the series were published by the publisher called Verloren, which is a quite prominent Dutch publisher of historical materials. And in the early 2000s, Rudolf Decker and Ariane Bacherman, together with Michael Mascouk from the University of Berkeley, established also a series in Brill, Egodocuments and History, which promoted the research into Egodocuments also globally. And since 2023, I'm also co-editor in the Egodocuments and History series in Brill. As you can see here in red, there are quite a few publications that dealt with various aspects of egodocumental studies. So first of all, the I, but also relation between the I and the time, memory, family, enlightenment. So many different aspects, though most of them focused on social and cultural history. So if we use the term egodocuments, some can say that it is limiting because egodocuments are a defined set of sources. Not everything is an egodocument according to this definition. And I will get there in a moment. But in order to build further narration, further exploration of sources, you need to have this narrow definition. So it's not a boundary, but rather a foundation. Over the years and parallel with the with the Egodocuments approach, there were others, self-Stoic in Germany, and Écrit du Fort Privé in France, life writing in Poland, the idea of egodocumentality, which were developed by different scholars in different countries. Many of the countries have their own way of dealing with those personal sources. But what is important is that some of them include a lot more than the written text. For example, oral narration. It is part of egodocumentality or maybe a self-narrative. It is not a classical egodocument. If you take Winfried Schulze, you can speak about autobiographical aspects when writing someone else's biography, when a person projects his own life or her own life into a written text. You can take it even as far as thinking about personal libraries or personal collections, where people analyze those libraries or collections with the idea that it tells something about the one who collected them. So in a way also some sort of self-reference. So we can speak about personal archives, libraries, paintings, apartments, photographs, biographies, personal collections. So practically anything could have this personal element and could be considered as an egodocumental source if you take the wider definition. So what is important is that egodocuments are not only sources for historians, pure historians, and by pure historians I mean those who deal with cultural, social, and political history, but also historians who deal with legal history, with art history, with philology, history of literature, for example, because those sources can contribute to our understanding to different topics if you ask different questions. So if a historian asks himself, so what were the human conditions at a given point, or what was the religious authority providing for something, or what were the religious feelings of a person, or personal state of mind, what was the person's relation to privacy, a legal historian would ask himself, so what is the legal perspective? And the art historian would ask, how does it contribute to my knowledge on the art piece or art theory that was created at a given time? So same sources, but different questions asked and different information obtained. That is the interdisciplinary approach, and that's why the center was created, because the idea was that we have a place where people from different disciplines can come and work together on similar kinds of sources, everyone bringing a different perspective into this. And I would like to give you an example from my own domain, religious history, how we can work with those sources. So my field is religious history, history of religious minorities, and when I think what kind of sources I can find for my own interest, I would think about what you see here: confessions, wills, testimonies of faith, flight accounts, etc., etc. And people did write those in different circumstances, especially during problematic times. So ego documents are perfect to study crisis. And if I take as an example the city of Amsterdam, I can know, based on this repository that you saw on one of the previous pages on the catalog, that there are about 67 ego documents written in Amsterdam at the time, and that you have members of different religions, sources written in different languages. And here you can see that a literary historian would find something interesting, because there is a question of the genre of the literature. Legal historian would be speaking about coexistence or limitations, because people also write about this. And I, as a historian of a religion, would be interested in the religious aspects. In those sources, you find, from religious perspective, the self-reflection or the introspective. A person gives account on daily basis or on monthly basis or at the end of his life or her life about good things and bad things that he has done. And in this way, I learn how people actually live their religion. Did they go to the synagogue on daily basis? Did they get baptized indeed at the time that was allocated? How did they die? All those things you can find in personal narratives. So if you speak about the current field of people who are interested in ego-documental sources or self-narratives, the field became quite big in recent years. If in the, well, around 2015, I personally thought that the field was shrinking. In the past 5 years, the field is actually growing. And partially thanks to the work that we are doing together with my colleague Adrian Czechanovsky at the Nicolaus Copernicus University in Torun, through International Ego-Documental Network, which we founded back in 2023. It's a network that encompasses quite a few scholars from Europe, but also from the States, and we are constantly growing. So we are trying to engage more and more people in the work on ego documents, and we have representatives of different historical disciplines that come to our conference and work with us on those topics. And currently we have several volumes in preparation that discuss different aspects of sources, but also the way that they impact our work as historians. So the main idea about the Center for Self-Narratives at the University of Lodz is collaboration, exchange of ideas, and experimentation, trying to take work at the center into different directions, perhaps not so obvious. So collaboration, for example, with University Library about on the topics of digital humanities, digitization, but also ways of searching material, obtaining material, cross-referencing, bringing people from abroad to work with us and to learn from us in order for us to learn from them, to encounter new ways of working with those sources. And as I mentioned earlier, to be a place where people can connect and find peers for grants, for projects, for articles and books to work on together. And we have already started doing it by trying to collaborate on a book on history of art and privacy and ego documents. And I'm sure that other projects are going to follow. Um, the goals are to promote the use of self-narratives, engage in creating a public space. Importantly, lectures that this is the first one, but there will be more during the coming semester and the next academic year. We will invite people from University of Łódź, but also from abroad and other cities in Poland to discuss how they work with Egodocuments in their own respectful domains. Grant applications already mentioned, and it is our aim also to be the place that could provide expertise on egodocumental sources, both in Poland and abroad. And I must say that at the moment, we are one of the only centers explicitly specializing on personal narratives. Not the only one, but one of the very few. And a very ambitious goal that we have is creation of a national database of Egodocuments in Poland. One more important milestone is the project for companion for Egodocuments, which started with the center in mind before it was created. It's the companion for Egodocuments, which was commissioned by Brill and is edited by François-Joseph Rougiu, Michael Mascouk, and myself for Brill. And we already have about 25 to 30 chapters that we will be speaking about different types of Egodocuments, different methodologies, different disciplines, and also different countries in which those documents are researched, in what way they are researched, in order to allow for scholars to make studies longue durée on the one hand, so over a long period of time, but also cross-discipline. And this is an open invitation to everyone to think together with us about how selves are articulated in writing, in speaking, in art, in law, in architecture, in Jewish studies, and in everything else. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions?
Maybe I have a question. Could you say a little bit more about this database, your idea, how it should look like, and what kind of Egodocuments, Polish Egodocuments you want to include?
The idea of a database, maybe I should repeat the question in case the YouTube didn't catch it, but the question was how do I see the Egodocumental database for Polish Egodocuments? And the idea is to create a database that would encompass sources from the oldest ones that are there and all the way the very first stage to the First World War, because then there is explosion of sources, which doesn't mean that simultaneously people who could be affiliated with the center or perhaps not would not do the same work for period that would follow on. For example, Egodocuments of the Holocaust, which would be a very important topic because there are also quite a few of them that are still preserved. The sources could be of I think at the very first stage of the classical kind of Egodocuments, so diaries, personal notes, autobiographies, memoirs, perhaps collections of letters, but of course if we are starting to inventarize all the letters, it will be a mission impossible. So I think that letters could only be included at the first stage as a collection, but not as one-to-one. It is a job that would take a long time to accomplish, but I think that it's important that we start because, in fact, there are quite a few such databases around the globe. There is a Catalan database, there is the Dutch database, there is the French database, Swiss, Lithuania had one, but unfortunately it has been taken down. German. So I think that it's time that Poland also joins this initiative. It would be very important, I think, for all historians working in Poland to have this access to those sources because That would enrich the experience immensely. Of course, some of them are known and have been researched, but quite a few are still lying in the libraries without being identified. So that's the goal.
So following the question of Adam, would it be the base of information, like a inventory of these items, or you mean also scans and the documents in the, I don't know, photographic sources, you know, the pictures?
First of all, the goal is to create inventory. So at least a person, a scholar, or anyone interested could go to the catalog and search by keywords. For example, I don't know, a merchant woman from Torun, uh, years 1600 to 1800 or to 1900, or merchant women in general in Poland. And then you could get a list of those sources, and then you could uh, get the inventory number and check if there is possibility to get it online or not. Scans are more problematic because then you would need permission from each specific library, and it would also cost a lot of money to keep those sources. So I think that at the very first stage, the inventarization is important, but we do plan in cooperation with the Łódź Library, the University Library of Łódź, to have also digitization. But of course, it requires a bigger project. But we are thinking about it and working on it. Any more questions? Well, if not, then I think that we can close the session for now. Thank you very much. And I invite you to the next talk, which will be in 2 months, and I will inform everybody about the speaker and the location. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.